Hi, this is Marilyn. I just wanted to come on here before we start the podcast. This is a repost of my Mother Myself, a podcast that I posted 4 years ago. And because we've celebrated Mother's Day in the US and the Caribbean, which Silver Fox, my mum, is actually residing in the Caribbean, I thought I'd repost this because there are so many women that have quite complex and difficult relationships with their mother, and they may want to get some understanding of it, or their mother may have passed, and therefore some of the insights in this podcast will kind of help you, not kind of help you, will help you be able to make the first steps of reconciling your emotions about your situation with your mother, whether your mother is alive or not, whether your mother's in your life or not. There will be some resources and some information that will be able to help you. And so I hope that you get what you get your questions answered in this podcast episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Also share this with anybody that you feel may benefit from this podcast and this particular episode. And this is why I felt it would be the right time, especially as I got more and more listeners coming into this space. I think it's the right time to share this podcast. So enjoy and see you next week. Welcome to the Candid Conversation Show. I'm your host, Marilyn Fontaine, artist and creative coach for women who want success and income with ease. Hi, this is Marilyn, and this is the podcast, episode 9. I was meant to record this podcast 2 days ago, but I've been not so well with a cold. It's really interesting. The subject this week is my mother myself. So I imagine it to be quite a powerful share. So I hope you get something from this. So as I record this podcast, I just realised that the author who created a book based upon this title, Nancy Friday, passed away in November 2017. Friday created her book, I don't know, probably back in the 70s. Now, people are kind of, how can I say? Well, people are actually now criticising it, slamming the book, saying that a lot of the ideas are outdated. A lot of her theories were not, they weren't concrete, they weren't proven, they weren't researched enough. But at the time, I think her book was really instrumental in helping me to understand the complex relationships of mother and daughter. So I think it did its job for some of us, and maybe for other people. We live in an information age, so we have more literature, books, examples, podcasts, YouTube videos at our disposal. So we can pick out the theories of yesteryear. So but for me, I think that book has helped myself and many other people, including my clients. So I want to dedicate this episode to Nancy Friday because a lot of her books really helped me as a woman growing up and not understanding a lot of things. And a lot of people did not write about the things that she wrote about. I hope to make another podcast based upon My Secret Garden, which is another book that she wrote. And The Power of Beauty is another brilliant book. So hopefully that will be future podcasts. Anyway, I'm now going to make the episodes 30 minutes because we are now on iTunes, and I think that it will be much more beneficial to have 30 minutes, then I'm not having to rush subjects. And also, you fed back to me how much you've enjoyed the podcast and you want more and more and more. So 30 minutes, 3 is a magic number for me anyway. Again, the letters, the emails, the WhatsApps that people are notifying me, or people are contacting me, or commenting back saying how much the podcast has helped them. So this is the aim, is to make a difference, is to help you maybe get some clarity on something, and also your sharing, your experiences are going to enable me to share with others. So, and I think the good thing about the podcast is that you can actually download them and listen to them on the go, which a lot of people have said to me, I've been listening to your podcast as I'm traveling and it's brilliant. So I think that just being able to access something without having to watch a video is really good medium. It really helps me. So I do hope that it's helping you. Okay, so we're going into my mother myself, and I haven't scripted this. I'm just going to go on, obviously, the feeling of what these relationships are about. And okay, let me start. So quite a few of my coaching clients, without disclosing too much, have to go through a few challenges in life. And even in my journey and parallel in my coaching client, there's always, before healing can happen, there's always a separation. And it goes back to when we're young, and children have to find their own autonomy so they can build their sense of self. That this maybe it's a physical separation from the breast, or maybe an emotional, mental separation from the parent. And I suppose I'm not a child psychologist. I suppose that's probably where the child probably starts to get its tantrum. It starts to develop its will. I find that with women, especially women, that there has to be a kind of separation with the same-sex parent, with the mother, or the caregiver. And this is really, really important, because it's a way a woman can or will form her own identity, and it's different to the the child separation that I just described. With a woman, she needs this physical separation. When I say physical, I don't mean like leaving home, but she needs this kind of maybe energetic separation from her mother, just to get a sense of her own self. Because what we find with our matrilineal line, our mother line, is that we, as women, we do inherit a lot of behaviors, beliefs, ancestral behaviors as well. So that's in our DNA. So if, which I have seen so much with clients, if your grandmother had a situation or a condition, then your mother will have a situation and condition, and then you will inherit that. And it's different if it's a physical condition, because we can see it, we can treat it. But with a mental, emotional, or psychospiritual situation, sometimes it doesn't play itself out so consciously. You're not aware of it so soon. But what the good indicator is that our external relationships, and that could be our external relationships with members of the opposite sex, or it could be our external relationships with other women. It could be our external relationships with authority. So it's where we carry our stories, in our body or in our dynamics. And it's really, really important that we, as women, understand that there has to be a separation on some level so you can step back away from the painting and you can see what's in front of you. And that does require journaling, it does require healing, it does require self-reflection, and getting to know yourself, because we don't have the rites of passage for women and men, so to speak. And obviously rites of passage starts maybe, I don't know, 12, 13. And that's when a young woman or a young man goes through a set of practices, maybe spiritual, religious based, cultural based practices, where they get to know their stuff and they learn about certain topics. But in some societies, this is not done by the mother. It's done by the people that are especially especially trained in these areas. So, which is a really beautiful, or a lovely, or I would say really practical way of ensuring that one gets the best input and schooling in a non-biased way, which is always the best way. So someone's sent away and they're sent away to develop, or they probably attend classes to develop their own relationship with the world away from the parent. Now, most parents these days are armed and equipped with ways to deal with their daughters or their children. So, when I look at my cousin and my goddaughter, they're just really, like the goddaughter will say, I've been raised by a village. So she's been raised by so many different people that's helped reinforce her own character, her own natural development. I mean, it will help that her mum is a counsellor, so that is, and her mother's done, or always does some type of self-reflection to a degree. But what about the people who don't have that? What about the people who have a relationship with their mum but don't really have their own sense of self? So they have an enmeshment, so their relationship with their mom is pretty estranged. It's pretty, pretty challenging, because it's laced with anger, it's laced with duty, it's laced with guilt, it's laced with, toxicity. Oh God, I got that in properly. It's laced with, I don't know. So there's one thing that sometimes I find certain individuals will say, we are such and such, so we don't do that. So we are black women, we don't do this. Or we are, we're from this country, so we don't do that. We are this age, so we don't do that. So all restrictions are put upon the child before they even have time to actually know the truth. And one thing I would say is that when you give your child all these restrictions in a way of protecting them, what happens is the minute they have a glimpse of sunlight, and that could be in the form of a partner, a charismatic partner, more often, or if they're lucky, a meaningful guide, then they're going to go. If we check back to, the glimpse of sunlight, and it's a charismatic person, they're going to show them a different world. But that's not necessarily the good thing, because again, if you've been sheltered or you've been given all these restrictions, you're more vulnerable to be influenced by people who's got more worldly knowledge or more of a sense of self to you. And this is where you have empaths who take on all the emotions of other people and attract people that are more than likely going to create some sort of abuse or dysfunction. So let me track back step by step. So if you have a child, or you've been raised in a situation where there's lots of duties and beliefs and behaviors that have been projected onto you, and you don't know where you end. There's no sense of boundaries in your life because of family dynamics or parental dynamics. Or again, you could have the situation where the parent, because they've lived a life of restriction, could be envious. So all these things are happening. Then you're going to be carrying that. And so again, Erykah Badu's song Bag Lady, you're carrying all this baggage. A lot of the baggage isn't even yours. It's inherited baggage. So we will say, oh, I've got issues. I've really got issues. But actually, how many of those issues are yours? So a good way to work through this is to actually look at certain things that you do or certain things that you say, and really, do some self-inquiry. So when you catch yourself saying things, or I can't do that, I can't go to college, or I can't get to university in my 40s, can you not? By whose rules is that? There's something in NLP where some people will make a statement and it's full of generalizations, and we would question that, and we would say, really? So for example, if someone says, nobody goes to college, at 45, then the practitioner will say, well, nobody, so you're saying nobody in this world will go to college at that age. And what that does, it enables you to put things into perspective. So if you are saying something and it's not really true, you question yourself. So you say, is this true? And then another question you ask, is this my own belief, or does it come from my mother? Does it come from my family? Does it come from my grandmother? Does it come from my caregiver? Because that's one way to start identifying the language which creates the belief system inside your DNA. And that's one way of starting to separate and starting to inquire what's yours and what have you inherited. So that's one way. So you've got these beliefs. There's a lack of boundaries because, again, sometimes a lot of parents will say, you're not having a lock on your door because it's my house. There's no secrets in this house. Who are you hiding from? I remember one time I was really worried about writing. I used to journal from really young, and I would worry that my mum would find my journal. But I used to just write really rough in case she did, which was really funny, but it never stopped me expressing myself. And I also remember when I was, early 20s, and I went through a really funny relationship with my mum between 18 and 21. And I was going through a really strange relationship with my mum, and that's when I started to have panic attacks at 21 because I was changing, I was growing. And I left college, and I think my mum was really nervous and scared about me going out into the big wide world. I'm the last child. But what I realised was it was her fear, and I was absorbing that. So for me, I had to go through an emotional separation and say, well, that is yours. I'm going to find out and discover what I need to do in my life. And that's when I got into personal development. And the first book, Living in the Light by Shakti Gawain, that just made me realise that I was more than just a basic human being. And we all are more than just basic human beings. We are so much more. We're spiritual beings having human experiences. And through this stress and this tension and this anxiety and the panic attacks I had, I was able to rediscover who I was and go on that journey. And kind of emotionally separate from my mum and say, I'm going to learn my way. And in the end, I was able to come back, emotionally to my mum and come back as an adult. And we do have an adult relationship. There's times when, she can baby me, but most of the time we have an adult relationship with each other. And so for me, some situations are just, the parent is just not receptive. My mum is very receptive and she does try. She will study, she will learn, and, she's always doing things. But there's some parents that, and, unfortunately, there's some parents that just cannot do it. They just cannot see it. And that's so heartbreaking to see. But what you can do if you are in this situation is emotionally separate from your mother. And if you do have dynamics with your mother, then I really think that therapy, coaching, healing, any of those modalities, journaling, just to help you move from this situation, because you do not need that parent in front of you to heal any dynamics that you have personally within yourself. It would make it more easy if the parent is in front of you, but you don't need to do that, just to get clarity within yourself. There's a lot of techniques I use with clients that does not require that person to be there. So, you've got Gestalt therapy, you've got peripheral positions in NLP. So, and they're really, really good. I've worked oh my goodness me. I've worked intergenerationally with people. So both with the parent and without the parent. So it doesn't, this is not that important if you have not got that parent, you're not in a relationship with that parent. But it's important that you work on that healing, because it's about reparenting yourself. And I'm going to give some sources after the podcast of books that are really, really good, that you can work with as well. So we've got to the stage of boundaries and, the emotional, mental separation from the parent and working through your stuff. So this requires that you start looking, you're questioning, you're inquiring, you're looking. Also, you're looking at the PVR triangle. Again, if your parents have been always, or your parent always had a victim stance, then you're going to attract persecutors, or you're going to be the persecutor. So you're always going to be in a victim, persecutory, or rescuer dynamic. You want to get onto the adult place, even though sometimes you're going to get into those dynamics. So again, look at your relationships. I remember one client saying to me, I'm having so much dynamics with so many people. It's always women. And I actually said to that client, what is your relationship with women? What is your relationship with women in your family? And I was able to just pinpoint that the persons that they was having a dynamic with their own family members. So we just repeat externally what we, what's happening in our childhood. We're always trying to experience and grow from situations. So, it's really important that those, you look. So in self-inquiry, speaking, observation, looking, where are you? Are you always a victim? Are people always doing things to you? Then where's that coming from? Because that is the foundation of which you've learned to relate to the world. So if you are always a victim in lots of different situations, what has happened in childhood or teenage years? What is your relationship with your parent? Is it a victim, persecutor, or rescue? Are you always rescuing that parent? If you're always rescuing that parent, then there's more chances than not, then you're not living your life. You've got hidden dreams that you've not fulfilled because you've sacrificed yourself not to move to the next level because you're rescuing a parent psychologically. Yeah. Our poverty situations sometimes are related to not wanting to move forward psychologically because we'll leave people behind. So if you're always rescuing the parents, again, where am I in my life? How comes I cannot move forward? How comes I cannot complete something? Why is that? Was things taken away from me as a child? Anything I enjoyed, was that confiscated from me? If that happened, then more often than not, there may be some cases where you was prevented from doing the stuff that you love because it just wasn't, you couldn't do that at home. So that's one thing, if you're not finishing something. So am I aggressive to people? Do I always attack people? That means if you are like that, then there's a boundary issue. Somebody else is sitting in your body with you. So again, what is your psychic attachments? Are you so close with your mother that, we got the best relationship, me and my mother. This is what you're saying. We've got the best relationship, but deep down, you've sinus problems every time you're around your mother, which means you're irritated by somebody, or you come out in a rash if you stay with your parent, but you've got the best relationship. And when you actually check it, your relationships with women in authority, you get really angry. So that's another thing. And it's really, there's one phenomenon I would like to explore as well, is when you have men that are really close to their mum and they do not choose women that look like their mum. If anybody has got any idea why, maybe that's another podcast, but that's another thing which is really funny, that some men that are really close to their mother choose a partner totally different to their mum. Is that underlying anger? Is that underlying resentment somewhere? To think about. But so back to what I was saying, we digressed. What's going on? Are you angry with other women? Are you angry with the world? Is that because your relationship, there's no boundaries? You feel like you're being controlled. There's no space for yourself to be yourself because it's just not allowed in your environment. So that situation will require really a lot of self-reflection. And again, that will be, what is mine? What is my mother's? What is it my mom expects me to do? Am I a bad daughter? Because some mothers may say, you're really bad. I've heard clients say that their parents have said, you're no good, you're this, you're that. And all the words that are being said to the daughter. So what words, what language is being used? So again, it's looking at those things. So I'm a bad person. Who says you're a bad person? Just because one person does 10 other people say you're bad? So again, it's really looking at those words. And sometimes, from what I've experienced with some clients, the separation with the mother can be so painful. But at the end of that, you have a friendship. You have a rejoining with somebody, and it becomes so beautiful at the end, because you're able to stand as a human being. And if this is not done, then you're always going to go back to that dynamic, and it doesn't need to happen when that parent is gone. It should, I'll never say should, it needs, like I said, even if there's no relationship with that parent, it's important that you have that for yourself more sooner than later. So, looking at the PVR triangle, looking at how you relate to the world, looking at words that have been said to you, really looking at those things. The reason why I'm talking about solutions, rather than just the dynamics, because again, if you have been through a really strained relationship with your mother, your pain body, or the part of your body, that's the emotional body, which carries all the pain and trauma from childhood, is going to relate to this too much. And what we want to do, we want to acknowledge where you've been, we want to acknowledge the pain, but we also want to move you through that, because you deserve healing more than you deserve the story to be replayed. We want to acknowledge the story. We want to sit there and witness the pain that you've gone through, but we want to move forward, because that's where the healing is. It's not on the bridge, it's on the other side of the bridge, actually. because that's a distance travelled. When you're stuck in that pain, then you're not going to move forward. And one way, if you are experiencing a hell of a lot of pain, if this podcast is triggering you, this will pass. And just be in the moment, this will pass. If you have any triggers from this and you want to contact me, feel free to contact me at info@mjfontaine.co.uk, or leave a comment here. Anything that may, if you feel that you need to know more information, let me know. So we looked at certain dynamics, and there's one more key thing I would like to kind of highlight. Is that a lot of the times our parents are repeating history. Where did our parents come from? Our mothers. What have they experienced that has made them like that? More than likely they was born in a time where where there was no help, there was no support, there was no YouTube videos, there was no podcasts, they wasn't allowed to read, they was brought up in care themselves, or they suffered abuse. And not every parent that suffered abuse and all the difficulties in life are going to be like that. In fact, those parents are going to be the best parents ever. But it's really good to understand and to know that the person that's causing you pain is in pain themselves. They've experienced pain, they're in pain, and they don't know how to get out of it. So therefore, they're pushing that pain. Or again, they could just be fearful. They could be just in fear, which most of the time, fear and duty, as far as I'm concerned, is what's come up. Fear and duty, trauma, again, abuse. These are the things that your parents or parent could have experienced, and which has caused them to create a difficult dynamic, and trauma. And especially for people of colour or people that has experienced any intergenerational traumatic times, periods, history, you're going to have this pain by default anyway. So you could have the perfect parenting, but the grandparenting is still in the DNA. So this could be impacted. So again, it's acknowledging if you're parenting, you've had brilliant parenting, you've got brilliant relationship with your mom, but there's still a dynamic. It could be intergenerational, and it could come from great grandparents as well. Where does it stop? Where does this self-reflecting stop? I think most of the time it's just being aware and just acknowledging, not using it as an excuse, but just acknowledging, I come from a generation, or I come from a culture that has experienced profound loss, trauma, abuse. And I have to acknowledge the people that came before me that suffered this, and it may be impacting my life, but it doesn't make who I am. So that's the crux of it, is that we have a situation. We're born into a situation which creates a dynamic, which forms our personality, which exposes us to trauma, pain, abusive relationships, tumultuous relationships with other people, which makes us very unhappy. And from that, we look for healing. We either get the healing from a therapist, a group, a psychotherapy group, a coach, a healer, or we can read books to get the healing. And then we use tools of self-inquiry, journaling, looking at generalized statements, looking at statements that are not true about ourselves, which are quite derogatory and negative, and doing a spring clean on those words or those beliefs that we carry. And then we're looking at where we are, if we're rescuers, or we're persecutors, or we're victims, making sure we're not using those dynamics in our relationships. And then we are actually going to step back after all that journey, and we're going to look to our parents, which is best done afterwards, because that's after we've kind of built ourselves up. Otherwise, if we look to our parents and look at where they are first, we skip our own anger, healing, consolidation. We go back too much into the guilt. So after we've done our healing, we can turn around and we can look back, which is the main part of the healing, and realize where they've come from, what their background is about, and then and look at the intergenerational situations. Most therapists will tell you need to forgive your parents first. You need to forgive your parents, or you need to look at where they've come from, but which is really important. But what I've experienced is that some people really need to get the anger out first and their own feelings before they can get to a place of forgiveness, because they've got to work through the pain, or they've got to work through the feelings that they've come up straight away. But I would definitely, if you're going for any uncomfortable feelings, definitely psychotherapy or counselling. And then once all that, it's ongoing. That relationship is ongoing. But then what you'll find is that your spirit will be fortified, and you'll go to a place of healing and growth. And I just think that I've seen it so many times with clients. There's nothing better than when you know yourself and you know that you are okay exactly as you are. I want to leave this with a quote from Dr. Maya Angelou. It was the anniversary. It was her birthday. Anniversary of her birthday. She's transitioned 2 days ago. And she's got this affirmation that I always use. I love and approve of myself exactly as I am. And I love and approve of myself because I exist. I probably got that wrong, but it's something like that, and it's so profound. I will post that in the comments as well. So, tools that you can use. Again, I spoke about the therapy, I spoke about the coaching, I spoke about the healing. There's a really good book called Reparenting Yourself, the Inner Child book. John Bradshaw, I found that difficult, but that's a book that some people like. There is 2 books which I'm going to post on inner child. So inner child work is really good. And that's a Friday's book, which can be dated. My Mother and Myself. Flower remedies. So Australian bushflower remedies. There's one that's really good. Again, I'm going to post it because I can't remember the top of my head. Really good for that mother-daughter dynamic or mother-son dynamic if you're listening to this and you're a man. Some aromatherapy oils, rose, jasmine is really, really good. There's homeopathy. There's also, because again we inherit certain energies from our parents. I think his kidneys is ancestral. I might be wrong. Acupuncture is really good as well. So that will strengthen you as well. So any complementary therapies that you can have that supports that will be really important. I think cranial sacral therapy as well is really good. So within your healing, don't forget to use the body therapies. Bush flower remedies are brilliant. Batch or bark flower remedies, really, really good. I know my dad transitioned, and I wanted to clear some energetic stuff. I used there was a flower essence called broccoli, which was brilliant. So there must be another one. So you can look on the internet, or just again drop me a line. I will try and create a blog resource pack around this, because I think that is really important. We've gone to 37 minutes, so I'm going to stop the podcast. If you want me to cover more within this podcast, I can make a part 2, but I need you to comment, subscribe. We're now part of iTunes, so please comment, subscribe, and share this to anybody if it might need it. If you're a therapist and you've got any more information, please do not hesitate to contact me as well. And one more thing, try and join me on Patreon, because these podcasts needs to be sponsored, because now I have to pay to upload these, and I want to keep doing it, but I'm looking. It's £1 a month just to subscribe to this podcast, and it will help me create this content, because this is not about business. This is about sharing what I have, although I do advertise my business on here. And again, if you are a business, you want to advertise your services, the sponsorship would help this show immensely. So just feel free to contact me. So if you want a session with me, again, if you just contact me, info@mjfontaine.co.uk. I'm going to leave the information at the bottom, or just go to the website, which the link is here already, www.mjfontaine.co.uk. It's Marilyn Fontaine. I'm signing off. Goodbye. You want to be part of an incubator of some amazing creative women, then you need to join the Highly Capable Creative one-to-one program with me. To join, you can just contact me at www.mjfontaine.co.uk and book a sales call with me to join this amazing 6-month program where we get to work on your creative business. We also get to work clearing your blocks and also bringing that confidence up to 100 so you can stand in your agency and live your best life.